Welcome to this video. If people know me well, they know the fact that I really like the Netherlands. This has to do with particularly one thing, that is good cycling infrastructure, but also a complete different thought on how to design and plan a city from the North American model of sprawl and cars that is. That is why I want to tell the story of how the Netherlands got to where it is, how they make cycling work in their cities, and is the investment in cycling infrastructure a good thing? Many people have the misconception that Dutch cities were always bike-friendly as they are today. This is not really the case, as cities in the Netherlands went through its period of building freeways such as other cities of the time. Back in the early 20th century, the reason why bikes were still dominant was because there were more bikes than cars, and they simply dominated the streets. They did not have the great bike lanes or beautiful bicycle parking garages as there are today, but they had their strengths through numbers. This, however, changed after the Second World War, as cities in the Netherlands were obliterated. The country needed to rebuild itself. Also, during this post-war period, there was an economic boom all across the Western world, which deserves a video on its own. And the Netherlands was no exception to this. It was one of the countries that was receiving aid because of the Marshall Plan, and the Dutch gross domestic product went from a little over $1,000 in 1960 to $2,927 in 1970, leading to many people affording cars and causing congestion. The country, seeing all these cars, looked at the American model of city planning and thought it was the future of cities. The American model was simple, and that was to have people to live in the suburbs and then commute to the city center for jobs through freeways. US cities were very young compared to European cities, and they were easy to make car-friendly. Meanwhile, in Europe, the cities were old and they were never designed for everyone to own a car, and freeway plans will have required the demolition of these buildings to make room, or the covering of this canal to turn it into a freeway, or turning public spaces into parking lots. During this time, cities such as Rotterdam fared the worst for the cyclists and pedestrians after the war, because of the fact the city center was leveled during World War II, giving developers and the city planners room to make the city more car-friendly. Because of these policies, the amount of cyclists in the Netherlands started to plummet. Cyclist deaths started to skyrocket, and fewer people started to bike accordingly. Cities were not entirely given to the car, as in Amsterdam, people protested the construction of freeways in the city proposed by Plan Jokinen. This plan would have led to the covering of a canal and the destruction of an entire working-class neighborhood. In Amsterdam, kids started to protest how much space cars were taking away on the streets. Following these protests, there was an OPEC oil embargo where the countries of the Organization for Petroleum Exporting Countries decided not to sell their oil to countries that were supporting Israel in the Yom Kippur War in 1973. This gave a sense of shock to the Dutch people that their cars which relied on oil was not the best way to design society around, and there should be more options available for transportation. Because of these two events, this resulted in a push to move people off their cars and onto bike. The government of all levels focused on providing funding for people to build safe bike lanes, and it still does today. Roads in the Netherlands went from looking like this to this, and as cycling deaths went down, and people felt safer to bike, the average distance that a person cycles went up as well. This was no surprise, as this is way nicer and safer to ride than this. The Dutch also went further to create a national highway system for bikes. People can bike from one side of the country to the other in safe, protected bike lanes. Although it works in the Netherlands because of their density compared to countries like the United States, but it shows the dedication of the Dutch in their quest to make their country accessible by multiple modes of transportation. There are many ways how the Netherlands designs their bike paths, streets, and intersections, which make them safe, and it's really not too complicated. In all of these designs, the cyclist is protected when possible with these islands, and the cyclist remains in line of sight of the drivers, meaning out of their blind spots. Unlike North American cities where cyclists are just dumped into the turning lane, creating these protected bike lanes does not take a lot of space to convert from the typical North American intersection to a bicycle-friendly one. An important technique is making streets nearly car-free, or autoblue. While vehicles can get through the area, the streets are given a higher priority for pedestrians and cyclists. making it feel as if the streets are car-free. This uninviting feel makes cars go slower as the driver is going to be more cautious in a crowded street than an open one. There are also techniques such as traffic calming to reduce traffic flow or speed, such as one-way streets, rough road surfaces, continuous sidewalks, narrow lanes, street cuts, and many more. There are some streets that don't look bike-friendly but are because of the low traffic volume. Thanks to filtered permeability, they are bike-friendly. To make the cities in the Netherlands efficient, the design of the cities often want to get as many people through the intersection, not as many cars as possible, because cars are not people. Traffic lights often prioritize transit first, and other crosswalks turn signals red for cars as they detect cyclists approaching to the crosswalk. Such systems are almost non-existent in some city centers in Canada but are commonplace in the Netherlands. The Dutch did not continue to invest in bike infrastructure because it makes for a better looking city, although I will say a walkable city is more better looking and has a better atmosphere than this. There are tangible reasons why the Netherlands continues to invest in cycling infrastructure. The first reason is an obvious one, and that has to do with traffic. A single car takes up way more space per person when compared to a bike or transit or walking. In this case, a moving car takes 28 times more space than a moving bike. All this extra space is space taken away from recreation spaces, street scenes like this, and the fact it distances development in massive moats of parking. As a result, it makes it harder to walk. Most restaurant owners would really like outside dining for their patrons, and in cities in the Netherlands, this is very much possible thanks to the reduced space for cars. This is even better during the age of COVID, where restaurants can safely handle more people outside rather than inside. For anyone that can't drive, such as children, a house on the suburban fringes limits freedom, the very thing that some very car-friendly countries are for, as that person has to be driven everywhere. This freedom from safe cycling infrastructure is one of the factors why children in the Netherlands are some of the happiest in the world and ranks highly on child well-being because of the freedom cycling gives them. This was a point made by the YouTube channel called Not Just Bikes, who I recommend you checking out on the subject. While the US thinks the best solution to ease traffic congestion is to just add lanes, they forget the fact that you cannot reduce congestion by giving more space for cars. Rather, finding alternatives for drivers such as train, bus, or bike, or a combination of all of the modes of transportation, which the Netherlands is great at. This use of all modes of transport is the reason why the city of Amsterdam has relatively low traffic for a city of its size. The second reason why biking is great is because of how cheap it is compared to owning and maintaining a car. With a car, it is expensive to buy, second, it costs more to maintain, and one has to buy gas, and electric vehicles are not cheap enough for the average person yet. This makes biking a compelling option when there are safe road conditions, such as in the Netherlands. Biking is a lot quieter than any vehicle. Reducing road noise is important in a city, and the city with less of it makes the city a better place to live. Amsterdam is known for having the atmosphere of a large village rather than of the largest city in the country because of the reasons above. Finally, another benefit of biking is that it's a good source of exercise. That helps to reduce the healthcare costs from the increase in exercise, and because of a reduction of pollution because of less congestion and heavy traffic. A person could ask the question that since people that bike breathe in more heavily and go close to traffic, don't they inhale more air pollution than a person that is in a car? Personally, I thought the same. While it is correct that people of active transport such as bikes and walking are exposed to more air pollution than people in a car, there are also studies that come to a conclusion that a person on a bike, when compared to a person in a car, will be exposed to less air pollution, even in a city clogged with traffic. The study claims this has to do with how a bike can avoid busy traffic on the streets, leading to quicker journey time in the city center, thus less exposure to harmful pollutants, and how with conditions such as rain and wind it can disperse pollutants. In a cabin of a car, the pollutants build up and are the reason why passengers in certain cases in a car can be exposed to more air pollution than a person on a bike. What cyclists can do is choose routes that have less traffic to further reduce their exposure. There are also other studies that in certain cases where even on busy streets, cyclists have higher exposure. Although I have to mention that most of the studies that are done are more concentrated in Europe, North America, and Australia, which are a lot less polluted than Asia and other parts of the southern hemisphere. Despite the fact there is a bit of debate and the true answer on exposure depends on many variables. What these studies do conclude and what you need to know overall is cycling is a net benefit to your health and the public's health, rather than using a car or being a couch potato. Over time, as the city builds more protected bike lanes such as the Netherlands and other European countries, more people will bike, causing reduction in pollution because of the drop in traffic, which is better for everyone because it does not sound like this. While over time, it makes the city more beautiful for the person living there. Over the past month, the amount of people that have come to this channel has gone up, and I now have over 2,000 subscribers, so comment down below if you're relatively new to this channel so I can properly welcome you. In the comments, you have left important feedback on what I can do to improve on my skills, and I will try my best to follow that advice. If you want to support this channel, consider subscribing and commenting as it helps with beating the YouTube algorithm. Also, while you're at it, consider following my Twitter @thejournal12 for behind the scenes content, link in the description below. Finally, thanks for watching this on video and see you in the next one.